The assembly will come to order. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson, Assemblywoman Benitez-Thompson, Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod, Assemblywoman Black, Assemblywoman Brown May, Assemblywoman Carlton, Assemblywoman Cohen, Assemblywoman Considine, Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblywoman Duran, Assemblyman Ellison, Assemblyman Flores, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Assemblywoman Gorlow, Assemblyman Hafen, Assemblywoman Hanson, Assemblywoman Hardy, Assemblywoman Howdige, Assemblywoman Kasama, Assemblywoman Krasner, Assemblyman Levitt, Assemblywoman Martinez, Assemblywoman Marzola, Assemblyman Matthews, Assemblyman MacArthur, Assemblywoman Brittany Miller, Assemblyman C.H. Miller, Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, Assemblywoman Nguyen, Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblyman Ortlicker, Assemblywoman Peters, Assemblyman Roberts, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, Assemblywoman Thomas, Assemblywoman Titus, Assemblywoman Tolles, Assemblywoman Torres, Assemblyman Watts, Assemblyman Wheeler, Assemblyman Yeager, Speaker Frierson.
Here, Assemblywoman Benitez-Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May the record reflect that all members are present.
The record shall so reflect there are 42 members present. The assembly will please rise for the prayer by Pastor Ken Haskins of the First Christian Church here in Carson City.
Let's pray. Our loving Heavenly Father, you are light. You're the light of the world, and your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. You're the source of light and truth and knowledge and wisdom. I pray that you'd bless these legislators today with the knowledge and understanding, the wisdom and a spirit of cooperation, enabling them to perform well today on behalf of all Nevadans. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order Business 2, reading and approval of the journal.
Carson City, Friday, April
Mr. Speaker.
16th.
Assemblywoman Benitez-Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to dispense with further reading of the journal and authorize the Speaker and Chief Clerk to make necessary corrections or additions.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Go to Order Business 4, reports of standing committees.
Mr. Speaker, Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which will refer to Assembly Bill 73-200, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. And the Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 207, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. And the Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 330, 436, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. Sandra Howdige, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Education, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 56, 224, 418, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. Shannon Bilber, Axelrod, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Government Affairs, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 87, 211, 220, 249, 270, 280, 315, 316, 333, 340, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. And your Committee on Government Affairs, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 153, 196, 268, 307, 336, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. Edgar Flores, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Health and Human Services, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 96, 345, 348, 374 has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. And Committee on Health and Human Services, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 343, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. Rochelle T. Wynn, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Judiciary, to which will refer to Assembly Bill 7, 115, 161, 296, 318, 326, 339, 400, 405, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. Steve Yeager, Chair. Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, to which was referred Assembly Bill 321, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. Brittany Miller, Chair. Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Natural Resources, to which were referred Assembly Bills 85, 102, 170, 209, 229, 356, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation and do pass amended. And the Committee on Natural Resources, to which was referred Assembly Bill 97, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back of the recommendation and do pass as amended. And your Committee on Natural Resources, to which was referred Assembly Joint Resolution 4, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to put the same back of the recommendation. Amended, do pass as amended. Howard Watts, Chair.
Go to order business 7, messages from the Senate.
Senate Chamber, Carson City, April 16, 2021. To the Honorable, the Assembly, I have the honor to inform the Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed Assembly Bill 16, and I have the honor to inform the Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed as submitted Senate Bills 512, 61, 107, 179, 284, 359, 360. Sherry Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of the Senate.
Go to order business 8, motions, resolutions, and notices.
Assembly Joint Resolution 4, introduced by the Committee on Natural Resources, urging the Congress of the United States of America designate certain land containing swamp cedars in Spring Valley as a National Heritage Area. Resolved that this resolution becomes effective upon passage.
Are there any amendments to the resolution?
I have Amendment 429, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 429 to Assembly Joint Resolution 4.
Assemblyman Watts has moved for the adoption of Amendment 429 to Assembly Joint Resolution Number 4. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment provides language that reflects the experience of indigenous peoples in the area, including language that discusses their spiritual beliefs as well as the massacres that occurred in this area, and urges the United States Congress and the President of the United States to take action to further protect certain lands containing swamp cedars in the Spring Valley area.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of adopting Amendment Number 429 to Assembly Joint Resolution Number 4 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Are there any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to amend to resolution.
Notice of exemption, April 13, 2021. The Fiscal Analysis Division, pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6, has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bill 40. And April 13th, 2021, the Fiscal Analysis Division, pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6, has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bills 28, 415. Sarah Kaufman, Fiscal Analysis Division. Revised Notice of Exemption, April 14, 2021. The Fiscal Analysis Division, pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6, has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bill 401. Sarah Kaufman, Fiscal Analysis Division. Notice of exemption, April 15, 2021. The Fiscal Analysis Division, pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6, has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bill 422. Sarah Kaufman, Fiscal Analysis Division. Notice of exemption, April 16, 2021. The Fiscal Analysis Division, pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6, has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bills 192, 370. Sarah Kaufman, Fiscal Analysis Division. Notice of exemption, April 18, 2021. The Fiscal Analysis Division, pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6, has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bills 161, 213, 220, 408. Sarah Kaufman, Fiscal Analysis Division.
Go to order business 9, introduction, first reading, and reference to bills.
Senate Bill 5, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services and Equity in Healthcare, requiring the Department of Health and Human Services to establish an electronic tool to analyze certain data concerning access to telehealth, requiring certain entities to review access to services provided through telehealth and evaluate policies to make such access more equitable, revising provisions governing services provided through telehealth and insurance coverage of such services, and providing other measures properly in thereto. Senate Bill 12, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs and Equity in Housing, requiring an owner of certain housing that is financed by tax credits or other money provided by a government agency to provide certain notices before the termination, expiration, or ending of a restriction relating to the affordability of housing, setting forth requirements for such notice, authorizing the Housing Division of the Department of Business and Industry to impose an administrative fine upon an owner who fails to provide notice of the termination or expiration of a restriction, authorizing the division to prohibit an owner who terminates an affordability restriction from applying for certain tax credits and providing other measures properly thereto. Senate Bill 61, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services and acclimated to persons with disabilities, providing for the training of licensees under the program for the operation of vending facilities by licensees who are blind, establishing procedures for the resolution of certain disputes related to the program, revising certain terminology related to the program, revising provisions establishing a priority of right for the operation by licensees of vending facilities in or on certain public buildings and properties, authorizing the operation of vending facilities by licensees in or on buildings and properties of certain agencies, providing for the election of the Nevada Committee on Vendors who are blind, and prescribing certain duties of the committee, authorizing contracts under which a licensee operates a vending facility on certain private property to provide for the payment of an incentive to the owner of the property, making certain other revisions relating to the operation of the program, adding exceptions to criminal provisions governing certain unauthorized sales, solicitations of orders, and deliveries in or on public buildings or property, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. Senate Bill 107, introduced by Senator Orangelob, an act relating to civil actions establishing provisions relating to the statute of limitations for commencing an action in tort for common law, wrongful termination of employment, revising provisions relating to the default statute of limitations for certain causes of action whose statute of limitations is not otherwise expressly prescribed by law, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. Senate Bill 179, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, an act relating to interpreters, revising the activities for which registration as an interpreter or real-time captioning provider is required, revising the requirements and professional classifications for registration as an interpreter or real-time captioning provider, providing for the establishment of qualifications to serve as a professional mentor and additional professional qualifications in the field of interpreting, revising certain terminology related to interpreting, and providing other matters properly in there too. Senate Bill 284, introduced by Senator Ratty, an act relating to taxation, revising the procedure for applying for and issuing transferable tax credits for affordable housing, requiring the recapture of transferable tax credits under certain circumstances, revising provisions limiting the amount of transferable tax credits for affordable housing that may be issued, eliminating the prospective expiration of the program of transferable tax credits for affordable housing, and providing other matters properly there too. Senate Bill 359, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to crimes, providing additional penalties if a fire or explosion results from the commission of certain prohibited acts, and providing other matters properly there too. Senate Bill 360, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs, an act relating to public employment, revising the appointment of certain members of the Board of Public Employees Benefits Program, and providing other matters properly there too.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 5, 12, 61, 107, 179, 284, 359, and 360 be referred to the committees as shown on Senate Bill Introduction, dated April 19, 2021, and all members have a copy of this on their desk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll go down to Order of Business 12, General File and Third Reading.
Assembly Bill 20, introduced by the Committee on Revenue, an act relating to taxation, revising the types of film and other production for which a production company may apply for certain transferable tax credits, revising provisions governing the eligibility of a production company for certain transferable tax credits, revising provisions governing the calculation of the amount of transferable tax credits issued to a qualified production company, expanding the circumstances under which the Office of Economic Development is authorized to withhold transferable tax credits, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. The People's State of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 6, end of Section 6, end of bill.
Are there amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 20, in its first reprint, makes various changes to provisions relating to the transferable tax credit program administered by the Governor's Office of Economic Development, including making various changes to the definition of qualified production, making the approval of the application at the discretion of the office, changing the time by which an audit of the qualified production must be submitted, removing the requirement that the production company's business address be located in Nevada, requiring qualified productions to acknowledge the state of Nevada in their end credits or elsewhere in the production, and specifying the qualified direct production expenditures timeline.
Any further remarks? There being none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 31 ayes, 11 nays. Bill empty the Constitutional majority. Declare passed and order transmitted to Senate.
Assembly Bill 42, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to crimes requiring certain batteries which constitute domestic violence to be charged with certain felonies and gross misdemeanors, expanding the courts that are required to conduct a jury trial under certain circumstances, revising various provisions relating to jury trials, authorizing the use of sound recording equipment under certain circumstances, making various changes regarding the jurisdiction of municipal courts, revising provisions governing the selection of jurors, establishing a right to a jury jury trial under certain circumstances prohibiting a person convicted of a battery which constitutes domestic violence or the same or similar conduct in another jurisdiction from owning or having in his or her possession or under his or her custody or control any firearm, providing a penalty and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 18, end of Section 18, end of bill.
Are there amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblywoman Nguyen.
Thank you. Assembly Bill 42 establishes a statutory right for a jury trial for a person charged with battery constituting domestic violence that is punishable as a misdemeanor and may prohibit that person from owning, possessing, or having under his or her control or custody any firearm. The courts in which such cases must be tried, a jury, are expanded to include justice court and municipal court for certain cases. All criminal actions, whether in district court, justice court, or municipal court, must be tried of a jury of 12 jurors unless the jury selection and the parties stipulate in writing with the approval of the court that the jury consist of a number less than 12 but not more, or not less than 12 but not less than 6. Sorry about that. The bill also revises various provisions relating to jury trials, including the selection of jurors, the use of sound recording equipment in certain courts, and the summoning of jurors from qualified electors of the county.
Any further remarks? There being none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 32 ayes, 10 nays. The bill having received the constitutional majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 58, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to the Attorney General, authorizing the Attorney General to investigate whether a state governmental authority, any agent thereof, or any person acting on behalf of a state governmental authority has engaged in certain patterns or practices that deprive persons of certain rights, privileges, or immunities, and file a civil action to eliminate such an identified pattern or practice in certain circumstances, establishing provisions relating to such an investigation, requiring the Attorney General to participate and cooperate in any investigation by the United States Department of Justice regarding whether the Office of the Attorney General has engaged in certain patterns or practices that deprive persons of certain rights, privileges, or immunities, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are there amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 58 authorizes the Attorney General to investigate whether a state governmental authority, any agent thereof, or any person acting on behalf of a state governmental authority has engaged in certain patterns or practices that deprive persons of certain rights, privileges, or immunities. At the conclusion of the investigation, a report must be issued that includes whether the governmental entity engaged in such conduct. If such conduct is disclosed by a certain person, they must be afforded protections against reprisal or retaliation. Finally, the Attorney General is required to participate and cooperate in any investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice regarding whether the Office of the Attorney General has engaged in certain patterns or practices that deprive persons of certain rights, privileges, or immunities.
Any further remarks? There being none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received the constitutional majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 129, introduced by Assemblyman Roberts, an act relating to elections, raising the thresholds for a committee for political action to open and maintain a separate account in a financial institution, making various changes relating to the reporting requirements of a committee for political action concerning its contributions and expenditures, requiring a committee for political action to report the balance in its bank account at the end of a reporting period, and providing other measures properly relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 14, end of Section 14, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 129 requires a political action committee receiving contributions of $100 or more to open and maintain a separate account in a financial institution. The measure also requires a PAC to report its account balance at the end of a specific reporting period. Further, a PAC must make certain reports concerning contributions and expenditures, and it must report the total of all contributions received during the reporting period that are $1,000 or less. Finally, the bill specifies that these new requirements only apply to reports on contributions and expenditures filed by a PAC after January 15, 2022. The provision specifying the new report filing dates is effective upon passage and approval. The remaining provisions are effective on passage and approval for the purpose of adopting regulations and performing other preparatory tasks on January 1, 2020 for all other purposes.
Any further remarks? There being none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. Bill item T, the Constitutional Majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 132, introduced by Assemblyman Flores et al., Senator Giannotti, an act relating to juvenile justice requiring a peace officer or probation officer who takes a child into custody to make certain disclosures to the child before initiating a custodial interrogation and providing other measures properly laid thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 132 requires peace officers or probation officers who take a child into custody to make certain disclosures to the child concerning his or her rights before initiating custodial interrogations.
Any further remarks? There being none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill item C, the Constitutional Majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 141, introduced by Assemblyman Watts, an act relating to evictions requiring the automatic sealing of records for certain summary evictions relating to defaults in the payment of rent which are granted during the COVID-19 emergency and providing other measures properly laid thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 141 requires a court to automatically seal any records relating to any action for summary eviction that is granted during the state's declaration of COVID-19 emergency related to non-payment of rent. The provisions apply to any action for summary eviction filed before, on, or after the effective date of the bill.
Any further remarks? There being none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 26 ayes, 16 nays. The bill having received the Constitutional Majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 143, introduced by Assemblywoman Krasner et al., Senators Spearman and Sotomayor, an act relating to human trafficking requiring the Administrator of the Division of Child and Family Services of the Department of Health and Human Services to perform certain duties relating to victims of human trafficking and providing other measures properly laid thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Are any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblywoman Krasner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 143 requires the Administrator of the Division of Child and Family Services of the Department of Health and Human Services to designate a human trafficking specialist within the program for compensation for victims of crime, ensures that a directory of services for victims of human trafficking is publicly accessible on the Internet, develops a statewide plan for the delivery of services to victims of human trafficking, and forms the State of Nevada Human Trafficking Coalition to assist the designated human trafficking specialist in carrying out his or her duties in maximizing resources for local human trafficking task force. Thank you.
Any further remarks? There being none, Chief Clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received the Constitutional Majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 148, introduced by Assemblyman Peters et al., an act relating to mining, revising the application requirements for obtaining a permit to engage in an exploration project or mining operation, prohibiting certain persons from obtaining such a permit and providing other measures properly laid thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 148 requires an applicant for an exploration or mining permit who is a corporation or business entity to submit with the application an affidavit that states whether or not the applicant is in good standing with all agencies in relation to exploration projects or mining operations, along with name and address of each person who has a controlling interest in the corporation or business entity. The bill prohibits the issuance of a permit if the applicant is not in good standing with such an agency in relation to an exploration project or mining operation. The bill also offers remedies for such a default scenario.
Any further remarks? There being none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 26 ayes, 16 nays. Bill having received the Constitutional majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 181, introduced by Assemblywoman Peters, enacting mental health, providing for the reporting of certain information by certain providers of health care relating to suicide, requiring certain insurers and other organizations providing health coverage to adhere to certain provisions of federal law, requiring certain insurers and other organizations providing health coverage to submit information demonstrating mental health parity and addiction equity compliance, providing penalty, and providing other means appropriately in thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 11, end of Section 11, end of bill.
Are any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 181 requires certain health insurers that provide health coverage for their employees to comply with the federal Paul Wellstone and Pete Domasini Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. The bill also requires each insurer or other organization subject to the requirements of the bill to submit to the commissioner of the insurance certain information that demonstrates compliance with the act. The commissioner may adopt regulations to carry out the provisions of the bill. Assembly Bill 182 also requires certain providers of health care to report information related to suicide to the chief medical officer pursuant to regulations adopted by the State Board of Health.
Any further remarks? There being none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 26 ayes, 16 nays. Bill having received the Constitutional majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 201, introduced by Assemblyman Gonzalez et al., Senator Stoneyante et al., enacting criminal procedure requiring each office of a prosecuting attorney to maintain certain records relating to certain informants, requiring a prosecuting attorney to make certain disclosures to the defense relating to informants, requiring a court to instruct jurors to consider certain information relating to informants, and providing other measures appropriately in thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Are any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks, Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 201 provides that the Office of a Prosecuting Attorney must maintain complete records of any case prosecuted by the office in which testimony or information was provided by an informant to a cooperation agreement. If a prosecuting attorney intends to use an informant's testimony or information at a hearing or trial, certain information or material must be disclosed to the defense as soon as possible, but no later than 30 days before the hearing. The court may order the disclosures to only be made to the attorney of the defendant and not to the defendant or any other party if making the disclosures may result in bodily harm to the informant. And lastly, a court is required to instruct the jury to consider certain information and assessing the credibility of an informant.
Any further remarks? There being none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 26 ayes, 16 nays. Bill having seen the Constitutional majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 406, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, enacting child support, providing for the withholding of gambling winnings of an obligor to apply to arrears in child support owed by an obligor, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
All right, members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
There are none.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 406 allows the withdrawal of money for the support of a child from a gambling winnings or of one who owes it, obligor.
Any further remarks? There being none, Chief Clerk will open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 41 ayes, 1 nay. The bill having received the Constitutional majority, declare passed and order transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 414, introduced by Assemblyman O'Neill, enacting real property, revising the exemption from real property transfer taxes for the conveyance of real property under a deed which becomes effective upon the death of the grantor, revising provisions governing the enforcement of claims against real property transferred pursuant to a deed upon death, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 6, end of Section 6, end of bill.
Are there amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 414 revises the exemption from real property transfer taxes for the conveyance of real property under a deed, which becomes effective upon the death of the grantor. Upon the recording of the death of the grantor affidavit in the office of the county recorder, the conveyance of real property is exempt from taxes imposed on the transfer of real property. This bill establishes a procedure for claims to be made against property transferred pursuant to a deed upon death if the grantor of the deed dies on or after July 1st, 2021. Any property transferred pursuant to such a deed remains subject to any claim of the Department of Health and Human Services to recover public assistance provided to the grantor. Lastly, the bill provides certain rights and protections to a person dealing with a beneficiary of a deed upon death.
Thank you. Any further remarks? There being none, Chief Clerk, open the roll. Anyone wishing to change their vote? There are 41 ayes, 1 nay. The bill has received the constitutional majority. Declared passed and order transmitted to the Senate. Go to order of business 11, second reading amendments. Someone will be next, Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under Order Business 8.
Order business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Assembly Bill 56 be taken from its place on second reading and be placed at the bottom of second reading.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Go back to order business 11, second reading and amendment.
Assembly Bill 7, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, enacting gaming, revising certain definitions relating to gaming, including revising the definition of associated equipment to include inter-casino link systems, revising, removing, or repealing various provisions relating to inter-casino link systems, requiring certain persons involved in the manufacturing or distribution of associated equipment to register with the Nevada Gaming Control Board, requiring the amount of live entertainment tax to be displayed on tickets for admission to live entertainment at certain licensed gaming establishments, repealing provisions relating to business entities who place racebook and sports pool wagers, repealing provisions concerning personnel of labor organizations for gaming casino employees, and providing other measures properly in there too. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 24, end of Section 24, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 135, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 135 to Assembly Bill 7.
Assemblyman Yeager's moved. The Assembly adopt Amendment 135 to Assembly Bill 7. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 135 adds a new Section 1 relating to the applications for and the approval of games or gambling games by the Nevada Gaming Commission. The amendment also removes certain offensive names of games from statute. And finally, it deletes Sections 22 and 23 of the bill.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 135 to Assembly Bill 7 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
None.
Bill's order general file.
Assembly Bill 73. Assembly Bill 73, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, enacting to dietetics, revising provisions relating to licensure to engage in the practice of dietetics, and providing other measures properly in there too. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 12, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 12 to Assembly Bill 73.
Assemblywoman Howdigy is moved. The Assembly adopt Amendment 12 to Assembly Bill 73. Remarks?
The amendment updates the name of the Commission on Dietetic Registration and Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics and adds "or its successor organization." It also requires an applicant for a provisional license meet certain eligibility requirements to take the registration exam.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 12 to Assembly Bill 73 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general file.
Assembly Bill 85, introduced by the Committee on Natural Resources and relating to agriculture, revising provisions relating to the control of noxious weeds and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1 of Section 1 and the bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 294, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 294 to Assembly Bill 85.
Assemblyman Watts moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 294 to Assembly Bill 85. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment authorizes the state quarantine officer to limit a declaration or temporary designation of noxious weeds to a specific geographic area in this state.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 294 to Assembly Bill 85 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general file.
Assembly Bill 87, introduced by Assemblyman Wynn and Roberts, an act relating to land use planning, authorizing cities and counties to establish a simplified procedure for the vacation and abandonment of certain easements and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1 and Section 1 in the bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 444, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 444 to Assembly Bill 87.
Assemblyman Flores has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 444 to Assembly Bill 87. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment clarifies that the simplified procedure for the vacation or abandonment of an easement does not apply to the abandonment or vacation of any street, drainage, easement, sidewalk, or other pedestrian right-of-way.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 444 to Assembly Bill 87 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general file.
Assembly Bill 96, introduced by Assemblywoman Cohen, an act relating to emergency medical services, creating the Emergency Response Employees Mental Health Commission, prescribing the duties of the commission relating to emergency response employees who are experiencing mental health issues as a result of the nature of their work, providing with certain exceptions that communications between an emergency response employee and a peer support counselor are confidential and not admissible in certain proceedings, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1 end of Section 1, Section 12 end of Section 12 end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 62, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 62 to Assembly Bill 96.
Assemblywoman Wynn has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 62 to Assembly Bill 96. Remarks?
Amendment 62 authorizes a governmental entity that licenses and regulates emergency response employees to contract with a nonprofit organization to establish a program of peer support counseling for these employees. It also requires the Division of Public and Behavioral Health of the Department of Health and Human Services to post on its internet website information concerning peer support services available for emergency response employees, and requires the division to collect and report certain information related to suicide among emergency response employees to the Chief Medical Officer.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 62 to Assembly Bill 96 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general file.
Assembly Bill 97, introduced by Assemblyman Watts, an act relating to health requiring the State Environmental Commission to establish for certain substances water quality standards, effluent limitations, and maximum permissible levels in public water systems, requiring certain persons to obtain a certificate of registration from the Division of Environmental Protection of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to store or dispose of certain substances, prohibiting with certain exceptions the use, manufacture, or sale of certain Class B firefighting foams, prohibiting with certain exceptions the manufacture, sale, or distribution of certain products containing certain chemicals, providing penalties, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1 end of Section 1, Section 27 end of Section 27 end of bill.
All the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 457, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 457 to Assembly Bill 97.
Assemblyman Watts moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 457 to Assembly Bill 97. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment modifies the prohibition from certain entities to discharge, use, or release certain Class B firefighting foam that contains certain chemicals, otherwise requires entities to notify the Division of Environmental Protection of such actions, removes the requirement for the State Environmental Commission to take action on certain substances, and instead requires NDEP to establish a working group to study issues relating to these substances.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 457 to Assembly Bill 97 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general file.
Assembly Bill 102, introduced by Assemblyman Krasner et al., an act relating to state lands and eliminating the requirement to impose an administrative fee for the issuance of certain to certain veterans of an annual permit for entering, camping, and boating in state parks and recreational areas, and providing other matters properly laid thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 3.
Remarks? I'm sorry.
I
Cut
have
you off.
Amendment 337 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 337 to Assembly Bill 102.
Assemblyman Watts has moved for the adoption of Amendment 337 to Assembly Bill 102. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment reverts the Division of State Parks of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources authority to charge the administrative fee and instead removes the 10% service-connected disability minimum requirement.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 337 to Assembly Bill 102, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 115, introduced by Assemblyman Wynn et al., Senator Scheibel et al., an act linked to parentage authorizing a court to determine in certain circumstances that more than two people have a parent-and-child relationship with the child, establishing provision concerning custody and visitation, adoption, and termination of parental rights in cases in which a child has more than two parents, requiring the committee to review child support guidelines, to review the guidelines established by regulation for the support of one or more children, to determine the amount of required support in cases in which a child has more than two parents, and provide any recommendations for revisions to the administrator of the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services of the Department of Health and Human Services, requiring the administrator to review and consider any such recommendations and revise or adopt any necessary regulations, and providing other matters properly in thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 10, end of Section 10, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 466 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 466 to Assembly Bill 115.
Assemblyman Yeager's moved. The Assembly adopt Amendment 466 to Assembly Bill 115. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 466 deletes sections 1, 2, 4 through 7 and 9 of the bill. It adds a new section authorizing one or more adults to petition the court for the adoption of a child. It authorizes a court to waive the hearing on a petition in certain circumstances. And lastly, it requires a petition to include a statement that there are no known signs that the child is currently experiencing victimization from human trafficking, exploitation, or abuse.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 466 to Assembly Bill 115, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 153, introduced by Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod, Senator Brooks, an act relating to public financial administration, clarifying that a local government may use any savings realized under a performance contract to make payments required under the performance contract, making a legislative declaration to encourage using agencies to utilize performance contracts to implement operating cost savings measures, and providing other measures properly made to the people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 60 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 60 to Assembly Bill 153.
Assemblyman Flores moved. The Assembly adopt Amendment 60 to Assembly Bill 153. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment authorizes a state agency, upon request, to use any operating cost savings generated from a performance contract to make payments towards the performance contract or reinvest the savings into other operating cost-saving measures.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 60 to Assembly Bill 153, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 161, introduced by Assemblywomen Torres and Summers Armstrong, an act relating to property, eliminating actions for summary eviction under certain circumstances, making various changes relating to actions for summary eviction, and providing other measures properly laid thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 18, end of Section 18, end of bill.
On amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 194, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 194 to Assembly Bill 161.
Assemblyman Yeager's moved. The Assembly adopt Amendment 194 to Assembly Bill 161. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 194 deletes sections 1 through 16 of the bill and replaces them with a new section requiring the Legislative Commission to appoint a committee to conduct an interim study concerning the process of summary eviction of tenants.
You've heard the remarks. All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 194 to Assembly Bill 161, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 170, introduced by Assemblywoman Martinez, an act relating to animals requiring certain notices of a right to request a hearing to be provided upon the lawful issuance of a citation or arrest for certain offenses relating to cruelty to animals, providing for a hearing to make certain determinations relating to an impounded animal, authorizing an animal rescue organization and animal shelter, and certain other persons to sell at auction, humanely destroy or continue to care for certain animals, requiring the State Department of Agriculture to create and maintain certain written notices relating to impounding animals and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the State of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 339, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 339 to Assembly Bill 170.
Assemblyman Watts has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 339 to Assembly Bill 170. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment revises the written notice requirements relating to impounded animals, authorizes certain employees of animal shelters to enforce certain laws, and revises the proceedings concerning certain citations or arrests for animal cruelty.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 339 to Assembly Bill 170 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 196, introduced by Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, an act relating to courts requiring courthouses to contain lactation rooms for use by members of the public under certain circumstances and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the State of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 286, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 286 to Assembly Bill 196.
Assemblyman Flores has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 286 to Assembly Bill 196. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment makes an appropriation from the State General Fund to the Interim Finance Committee for allocation as grants to municipal and justice courts for the cost of providing lactation rooms.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 286 to Assembly Bill 196 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 200, introduced by Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod, Senator Scheibel, an act relating to veterinary medicine, prohibiting the practice of veterinary medicine except within the context of a veterinary client-patient relationship, except in certain circumstances, authorizing a veterinarian to supervise a veterinary technician via veterinary telemedicine under certain circumstances, revising which acts constitute a practice of veterinary medicine, establishing certain licensing requirements for the use of veterinary telemedicine, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the State of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 124, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 124 to Assembly Bill 200.
Assemblywoman Howdigy has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 124 to Assembly Bill 200. Remarks?
The amendment adds a group of animals to the definition of veterinary telemedicine, clarifies the practice of veterinary medicine and a veterinarian client-patient relationship, clarifies that a supervising veterinarian must have an established veterinarian client-patient relationship to supervise a veterinarian technician via veterinary telemedicine, aligns with existing Nevada State Board of Veterinarian Medical Examiners language regarding courses of continuing education for veterinarians or veterinarian technicians by adding approved courses, and clarifies that a veterinarian practicing telemedicine is required to be licensed in Nevada.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 124 to Assembly Bill 200 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 207, introduced by Assemblyman Watts et al., an act relating to public accommodations, expanding the definition of place of public accommodation to include a business which offers goods or services to the general public in the state through an internet website, mobile application, or other electronic medium, regardless of whether or not the business is operated from a physical location, exempting certain online forms from the applicability of provisions governing places of public accommodation and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the State of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 241, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 241 to Assembly Bill 207.
Assemblywoman Howdigy has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 241 to Assembly Bill 207. Remarks?
The amendment amends the definition of online establishment to specify that a business, whether or not conducted for profit that offers goods or services to the general public in this state through an internet website, mobile application, or other electronic medium is an online establishment unless the business is operated from a physical location in this state.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopted Amendment 241 of Assembly Bill 207 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 209, introduced by Assemblywoman Martinez and Gorlo, unrelated to animals, prohibiting a person from removing or disabling the claws of a cat by performing certain procedures except if necessary to address the physical medical condition of the cat, prohibiting the removal or disabling of the claws of a cat for cosmetic, aesthetic, or convenience reasons, requiring licensed veterinarians to submit certain statements regarding removing or disabling the claws of a cat, imposing civil penalties and providing other means relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 341, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 341 to Assembly Bill 209.
Assemblyman Watts has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 341 of Assembly Bill 209. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment removes the requirement of a licensed veterinarian to furnish a written statement to the Nevada State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners along with the corresponding civil penalties.
Any further remarks? All in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 341 of Assembly Bill 209 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 211, introduced by Assemblywoman Howdigan, an act relating to wildlife, requiring with certain exceptions the Department of Wildlife to submit comments on the potential impacts to wildlife and wildlife habitat of a proposed subdivision of land and providing other measures properly relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
All right, amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 313, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 313 to Assembly Bill 211.
Assemblyman Flores has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 313 to Assembly Bill 211. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment incorporates the Department of Wildlife into the existing process for state agency review of tentative maps for subdivision of land and requires the governing body to consider impacts to wildlife when taking a final action on tentative maps.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 313 to Assembly Bill 211 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 220, introduced by Assemblyman Frierson et al. An act relating to peace officers, requiring each law enforcement agency to adopt a written policy establishing standards of conduct for the use of mobile devices by peace officers employed by law enforcement agency and providing other matters properly relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 316, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 316 to Assembly Bill 220.
Assemblyman Flores has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 316 to Assembly Bill 220. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment clarifies that a law enforcement agency may not approve for official use on a mobile device any mobile application that uses end-to-end encryption or any other means with the intent to avoid the creation, retention, or lawful discovery of records or data relating to the communications of a peace officer.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 316 to Assembly Bill 220 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 224, introduced by Assemblyman Duran et al. An act relating to education, requiring that the annual report of accountability prepared by the Board of Trustees of each school district and the governing bodies of certain charter schools include certain information relating to feminine hygiene products, requiring the provision of feminine hygiene products in the bathrooms of certain public schools, requiring the Board of Trustees of each school district and the governing bodies of certain charter schools to develop a plan to address access to feminine hygiene products, requiring the Board of Trustees of each school district and the governing bodies of certain charter schools to submit a report to the legislature and providing other measures properly laid thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 6, end of Section 6, end of bill.
Are the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 298, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 298 to Assembly Bill 224.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 298 to Assembly Bill 224. Remarks?
Amendment 298 to Assembly Bill 224 does the following. It changes the phrase throughout the bill from feminine hygiene products to menstrual products. It authorizes the Board of Trustees of a school district or governing body of a charter school that operates middle, junior, or high school to apply for available grants and accept grants, gifts, donations to implement the bill's provisions. It provides a 2-year program that would require 25% of all public middle and high schools to provide menstrual products at no cost in at least 2 women's restrooms. And it requires the Legislative Commission to appoint a committee to conduct an interim study concerning access to menstrual products in Nevada schools and the effect of the 2-year program, as well as report on the study's finding.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 298 to Assembly Bill 224 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would, at this time, move that the Assembly stand in recess, and we'll take a little respite, then come back to our work at the call of the chair.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are in recess.